I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Here we are. We're back. We're back in conversation with each other, continuing conversation in the way that we do. And it's really important that we are having these deep conversations because across the United States, as we're thinking about the primaries, as we're thinking about their political economy shifting, parties shifting in their ideology, and the conversation about like what's happening at the kitchen table. We're coming back to the kitchen table conversations. And I'm glad that you and I have been able to have the conversations that we're having, especially as we are deeper diving into how our ideology, our institutions are actually impacting us on an interpersonal level, in our lives. You were telling me a wonderful story about one of your family members reaching out to you, recognizing, that they may have, which is outside of what has been typical in the past. And I have been tapping on and calling on you in a tremendous way because I'm experiencing white supremacy in a way that I've never actually experienced, that I've been able to talk about and I've seen and heard, but like in my interpersonal relationships. And that is translating. It feels heavy to be in these type of conversations, but I'm glad that we're able to be in these kind of deep dive conversations as a model for what people might be experiencing, because the way that we are thinking about how we relate with each other, how we do create this more free, democratic, and humane society, what are some of the things that we really have to acknowledge to be able to get through those conversations on the journey through healing that we're all going through? And that's being amplified a lot more as we're going through these primaries, as we're making decisions about who's going to be in our leadership, so that we can have the institutions that govern us be in consideration of meeting the needs of greater amount of people. So you want to share some of your stories of interpersonal, and we'll get into what is going on with mine.
Yeah. We were both kind of laughing, or not laughing, but thinking about how these conversations, when we're trying to be intellectual and both of us are just like, our brains are like this, and it's challenging to try to focus on one aspect or a couple of aspects of what's happening outside of ourselves when life is lifing, right? And I was just recently down in North Carolina, in the town I grew up in, and it brought up some grief. I've been processing. I've been back now for a week today, and I've been processing it all week and realizing, I didn't really identify that it was grief until just recently. And then it was like, oh, that's what that is. And then unpacking where it came from and just trying to nurture myself through that. My mom passed away. It'll be 2 years in December. I can't believe it's already been that long, because it just,
I'm in a time warp.
Feels like it was just
going on.
Yeah, it feels like it was just a few months ago, and so when the grief shows up, it doesn't matter how long it's been when you've lost somebody. And so I just have to have patience with myself for that. But to your point, what you were speaking into was my sister reached out to me and said, I want to have a conversation because I might have caused some harm, and I wanted to check in with you and see what you think about it. And this is new. We've never had this discussion before. We've talked about harm. You and I have talked about harm on this podcast, and I've owned up to harm that I've caused, and we've unpacked it here. But this is the first time that I can recall that she's reached out to me and said, I want to check in with you. And it was a great conversation, and we got to really talk about how whiteness can shut us down when we feel like we've done something that makes us a horrible person. I'm using air quotes for those that are listening and not watching. and how important it is to learn how to move through that shame and that lockdown so that then you can either make amends for the harm that you've caused or learn how to move through it and do it differently next time. How can you engage with this person in a different way next time if you have occasion to be in space with the person again. And anyway, it was just a really great conversation. And you pointed out to me as I was relating back to you about how it went, you were like, you're changing, you're growing about how you talk to people. Because my sister was like, when we started the conversation, she's like, please be gentle with me. Don't. And she was feeling very vulnerable and very full of shame. And she didn't want me to come at her, which I'm sure I've done. And otherwise she wouldn't have had that reaction. So I think she and I are both growing. And I appreciate the opportunity for that. And I feel like you and my conversations about these things that's one of the biggest contributors to my growth. So thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. I mean, and like, let me return the thank you, because that it's interesting that you bring the word shame into this conversation. And in my personal relationships that's happening right now in my life, the word shame has come up a significant amount of times from my, what is she? I guess she's my sister-in-law. My I have to
What is she?
put it. How is she in relation to me? Because
I blocked that out.
because I'm shocked and surprised in my soul that I am in relation to a person that I've had to call on you a number of times to help me understand some of the racism that I've been experiencing in my family. So my younger brother, let me just contextualize the conversation. My younger brother is married to a white woman from Texas, a small town in Texas that I am clear has not had an opportunity to engage a lot of other cultural and ethnic spaces in their life. And so it's coming to a very clear head as there's conflicts between my brother and this woman, how racism, how we in our colloquialism would say super Karenism is exploding. And when I say by super Karenism, there's a term that has been attributed to white women in the United States who will interject themselves into spaces to target different communities because they are either unfamiliar, unaware, or holding an internal fear with what they are seeing, expressing, or just does not want. I mean, and actually you can probably better. I am communicating how I understand Karenism, but I know that you can contextualize for those who are listening or watching us what that is happening with white womanhood when they begin to target, demonize, and weaponize what I'm imagining is an eternal fear about a narrative that is being built in their head about folks that are different from them that they're not familiar with. I'm gonna pass it on to you.
You are, I would say that's a very generous and loving way to put.
Be gentle with the white women out there.
Well, I think the key word that you said in my head, as I think about what Karenism is weaponization. Whether or not they come to it because they have this internalized fear that's been taught to them, whether or not they are just flat out racist and want to flex their weaponization muscles, as it were, and they find themselves in a place where they think that their use of their weapons is going to work to their advantage. So for those
can we define what the weapons are? The position of power, being a blonde-haired, white woman in the United States that has been told throughout their whole life that you are the prize, you are the thing that is the standard. The standard is white womanhood, especially with blonde hair, blue eyes, in the way that we're seeing Donald Trump with his wife, where there's a tremendous amount of women that are trying to look like her, doing cosmetic surgery and all of that kind of stuff, because there is this narrative that is the quintessentialness of
Right.
womanhood.
And also too, above and beyond that, we're taught that we are to be protected by all. We're taught,
Thank
and
you.
I feel like it goes hand in hand. If you're not to be protected by all, then well, the idea that we should be protected by all suggests that there is intent to harm by all. Like there's a need for this blanket protectionism, right? Which I mean, that goes all the way back. I mean, it goes all the way back, but in my head, I'm thinking about Birth of a Nation, the first version.
Yep.
The one that came out in 1915 and was screened at the White House, where it was white actors in blackface portraying a black man trying to rape and harm a white woman. And that was the birth of the Klan. It was the birth of so many things besides Birth of a Nation. And so that trope, yeah, sorry.
I mean, just like that, I need to pause because that being the narrative that this nation wanted to be birthed on.
Yeah.
Like it just, that it was played at the White House, that it was shown to all people, both however you identify.
Right.
Folks were fed this narrative.
And that's in 1915. That's not 18 something.
No. It's no different for me than the Dritte Reich and what they were doing in Nazi Germany as far as propaganda. But this was the United States version of propagandizing race against Black folks, and that is how they were identifying, even in the name, in the title, a nation is being birthed out of the womb of creation. Okay, let's go on. Let's go on. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the timing of that, I think, is key. The fact that came out in 1915, this is not new, and it's also not old.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to say that out loud, but anyway, the idea, I mean, this is a very long trope, and it's a trope that, or long-lived trope. It's a trope that existed back even when, African Americans were enslaved, is that constant white women have to be protected. White women are victimized, and we are targeted by, never targeted by the white men that were doing all of the harming, but targeted by Black men and by anybody that didn't look like us. And so we had to be protected all the while. And we've talked about this before, all the while having so much of the power, having so much, I mean, how many white women actually owned the enslaved that were living on their property that were supposedly owned by their husbands? I'm using air quotes again, were actually often owned by the women. And so we have the ultimate narrative of being victim and perpetrator at the same time. Not unlike Israel, sorry, but that's the mindset that Israel does, is that we're the perpetual victims. Everybody's always trying to hurt us. We are, it's anti-Semitism, and yet we're going to annihilate an entire, race of people because we want their land. It's like, how do you reconcile that? Well, white women do that all the time. And so to get to the point of the description of Karens are often women who use their phones to call the police on Black people for breathing, for walking, for living, for drinking water, for picnicking in the park, for sitting in their car, for bird watching in Central Park, for all of the things that we've heard all of the tropes about. And so you are right now undergoing and living under
super Karenism.
I mean, like supernova super Karenism. Like when you think of a supernova as a star exploding, that's kind of I think in pictures, that's kind of what I think of when you describe what's going on, and everything that is happening is not happening. She seems to be not dialed into the fact that what she's doing is actually harming herself on top of harming everybody else. But
That
that's
is
that's often what whiteness does, is we just supernova on everybody that's around us, and it doesn't matter if we get killed in the process. So yeah.
because it's more an issue of being right and upholding the standard that is never actually attainable. This perfectionism, this I have all the answers, I know what's right, I can make a determination about what everybody else should be doing, how they should be doing it, and the reason that they should be doing it. And
on top of all that knowledge that I have, I'm also the biggest victim in the room, always.
So
make it make sense.
It's so many layers of complication, and it's really been a very difficult thing for me to sit in. I'm appreciative again for being able to have conversations like that, where it's interesting because it's typically like, oh, let me call you and check in, or like how your sister did, let me check in if I've harmed somebody who is a non-white body, and really the roles have been reversed, where I have called you like, I do not understand why I'm here. Please help me to have some clarity about how this person is thinking, how this person is operating, because it has been so inhumane. You speak about Israel. I'm also speaking, I'm always going to pull it to the United States, because the United States in its policies supports this type of violence and harm, because it really does exist in the foundation of a level of white supremacy that is becoming blatantly real. That that we allow this type of aggression while also saying the victims, like, we're doing this to protect ourselves because they're doing this to us, because the narrative building of something being a boogeyman to the point of the birth of a nation, a Black person or Black people are the boogeymans, and we have to make sure that we stand together to always be fighting this other thing that doesn't allow us to remain in our positions of power. And it is a very sick and violent power and control cycle that we all sit in and that we're impacted by, because on the other side of the conversation is when you are non-white body, Black body, brown body, however you want to identify, and you are indoctrinating into anti-Blackness also, you have to negotiate how, whether or not you are, you question yourself about things that you shouldn't question yourself. Like, am I doing something that is wrong, when you are being treated with lack of dignity, with lack of humanity, with lack of equity all the time, and you have to like negotiate that space and place, and it becomes really, really difficult for on that side of the scale. In addition to on the side of the scale, to your point, where those in positions of power are spending so much time trying to be right that they can't enjoy peace in their soul, any way, shape, or form, because if it's not one thing, it's another thing. It's continuous and continuous, and that is very destructive. It's very destructive on so many levels.
Incredibly, yeah. And I also, to offer, everything that you just said it seems like it's obviously an element of what's going on in this situation, but also too is the abusive dynamic. So the interpersonal abuse of human to human in a deep interpersonal relationship. And when you talked about that gaslighting, that am I really, I mean, as a person who have been in 2 abusive marriages, and we've talked a lot about this, and just the unpacking of what you're witnessing and trying to help your family members through, is just that you have it's a grooming process. It goes slowly. It doesn't, it's insidious. It whittles away every aspect of your sense of being, so that when you do then reach whatever pinnacle you reach and decide you need to leave, the resources that you have within yourself to know that you're making the right decision is like so far away from out of your grasp, because all of that sense of knowing what's best for you, what's right for you is
Knowing
gone.
yourself
Yeah,
is
yeah.
gone.
It's gone,
It's gone.
and it's been gone for quite some time, and then you get to a moment where you've got to resource it and access it, and it's not there. And I mean, it's wonderful that your family member has you and your other extended family to surround them and to help bring some of that sense of connectivity that a person who's been in an abusive relationship just has no access to. It's and you don't even know that it's gone until you need it. And then you go to grab it and it's not there and you can't reach it. And the hard part is that it takes as much time as it took to whittle all of that away, it's going to take, you know, a substantial amount of time to get it back. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, there's no quick fixes when you're dealing with trying to extricate yourself from an abusive relationship.
And I'm going to say in the context of abusive relationships, if we're looking about it like on a national scale, there has been this very abusive relationship that is being amplified right now. Like I'm seeing it in my interpersonal life, but then I'm also seeing it like on a national scale in the United States, where you're so interwoven in the ideology that it's hard for you to separate and remember yourself within the cycle of violence. You become so enmeshed in anti-blackness yourself as a
Mhm.
black body. You know what I mean? You become so enmeshed in um, what we were talking about in our last episode. Who are the haves and who are the have-nots? I think
Yeah.
James Baldwin would have said, "You have created and made this thing, and now you're mad at this thing that you created and made in the United States." And it's like the conditions cause the outcomes,
Mhm.
right? It's like if you do a logic model and you continue to put these certain continuous inputs in, the outcomes are going to be specifically, I mean, it's science, that the outputs are going to be what the inputs are. You know, how you mix chemicals together, you're going to have some type of outcome that
Yeah.
happens. And then you're mad at the outcomes after you put the inputs in. It becomes what we are dealing with, what I'm dealing with interpersonally, but then also what we're dealing with, like, you know, as a society in the US, in the United States, as well. We have all of these inputs that are violent on so many levels, and so to the word you used earlier, insidious, so intricately interwoven together that
Yeah.
it takes time, it takes conversations, it takes patience, it takes a lot of deep breath and a lot of grounding to be able to one name these things that they are existing, because it's hard for people to be in the accountability of actually naming that something is just racism, like some, you know,
Yeah.
just that, like, it's just like this, it's just racism. And if we name that it's just racism, then we can work from there on how do we work through the racism. The conflict is there. It's not to avoid the conflict, it's to say, okay, we are in conflict, we are in racism, we are in alcoholism, we are in violence and abuse with each other. And because we know that, now we can have a discussion about how we work through and get out of that. And
Mhm.
it, the United States is not doing that in this moment. The United States is like, you know, with the policies and the procedures, let's wipe out any, you know, cultural references in our libraries or in our museums. Like there's like, so that you don't ever have to address what the root of the problem is. And when you don't address the root of any problem, it's much more difficult to actually begin getting to a place where you have some resolve or some better
Right.
outcomes.
Right. Which is the intention, you
Mm-hmm.
know, for those that are in power and are doing the erasing of the touchstones within our history and our education
Saving.
system and our museums and our, you know, because they want the outcome to be what it is, and they
Mm-hmm.
know that the knowing of our history and knowing how we got here is in can be used to dismantle that which they're trying to uphold. Excuse me if you hear the thunder going. God is even agreeing with what we're saying right now, because
yeah, that's the
the
point.
skies have opened up and the thunder is just rolling out there right now. So it's like,
And I'm going to ask you, Diane, to explain exactly what it is that you're saying when you're saying the systems and all of that.
So let me use the metaphor of an abusive relationship to kind of talk about, because I think you're making a correlation between what the US is experiencing in its governance and in its intentionality behind erasing things and the outcome that it wants. If you think about an abusive relationship, if anybody listening or watching has been in one or has known somebody that's been in one, probably all of us do. When it gets to the point, not when it's like rolling and everybody is buying the narrative, and that's like the US in the 50s and 60s. Everybody was buying the narrative, and we were the ones that were in power, the white, the predominantly white families and stuff. We were oblivious. We were unconscious to what we were contributing to in a large aspect, not to take our culpability away, but the narrative was working. And then you start to it starts to unfold. They're not just fighting at home anymore behind closed doors where nobody's seeing it. Now the fights are starting to happen in mixed company. Now the fights are starting to happen, in public and in places where people start to see the breakdown of the relationship. And it's not just the people in the relationship that are struggling under the narrative. Other people start to see it, and they start to see how it's unhealthy. And then people start to tap the one that's being more victimized on the shoulder and go, hey, are you okay? This isn't, I'm worried about you, and I'm seeing this, and I'm worried about it. And oftentimes the victim will explain it away, because we don't want, we're not ready. We're not ready to face the reality of what we're living in that moment. And the idea of leaving it or rocking the boat or trying to extricate ourselves from that dynamic, no matter how toxic it is more frightening than staying where we know, because familiar is always better than unfamiliar, especially when right, you're comfortable. It's where it's
not better, but comfortable.
You know how to operate within those parameters. It may be totally fucked up, but you know how to operate within it. You know how to move. I'm a recovering drunk. I didn't do drugs. I just drank, but it was out of a sense of bullshit, control, because I knew exactly how many beers I needed to drink to get to X, Y, and Z inebriation. And that was my level of control over it. So it didn't make any sense, but that was how I stayed in that sickness for as long as I did. So I think the US, but eventually as the victim in that dynamic, as you start to wake up to, the more people that say, hey, are you okay? The more you start to go, maybe I'm not, and you start to pay a little bit more attention to what's actually happening. It's no longer as comfortable as it used to be to live within this, because now it's being suggested that there might be another way to live besides this horrible, space that you're in. And I think the US is and the abuser tends to up their ante, right? When you start to say, I don't know, start dipping your toe into, I'm going to leave, or thinking about and making, pushing back a little bit, not just succumbing, but you change the game a little bit, and you don't continue to do the thing that the abuser expects you to do when they, threaten you or whatever. They're going to up their ante, because they've got to get you back in line, and so they're going to start to escalate, and they're going to start the US is, to finish the metaphor, the US is really, I think we're at that space where, enough people have said, are you okay? The US is like, oh, hell no, we're going for broke. The people that are in power, the people that want to keep the systems in place, that want to continue this white supremacist agenda, that want this to be a white nation, just like it was when when my ancestors colonized it so many years ago. And so, they're up in that ante, but it takes the person that's been pushed down. I don't like the word victim. I prefer to call us survivors. It takes us to say, I know this is familiar, and I know, but it's toxic as hell, and
I don't
we
want
just
it
we
anymore.
we're not gonna do this anymore. We're gonna risk, and there's safety in numbers. We're gonna gather our community together of all these people that have said, "Are you okay?" And we're gonna brave this new world together. And super Karens be damned, because the Karens are gonna Karen,
And
and
they are. The United States
oh
in and
yeah,
of herself is
they are,
parenting, right? And
they are.
because to your point, to your metaphor, we did see this. We did hear the "Are you okay?" We did see those that were being the most oppressed in the United States systems.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, like
Right.
all of the things where it's just like, no, hold on a second, we not okay, and we
Say
need
her
to talk
name.
about
Yeah.
what we're teaching our kids. We need to talk about how we're treating our citizens, and we're not okay. We're not okay, and because we went through that period, through COVID, through our double epidemics, we went through that period. The abuser has said, "Oh, we need to remind y'all how we birthed this nation." And this nation was birthed in a way where to our point of what we experienced in South Carolina, to our point in a progressive California, what you can experience in a community that has a history of racism and violence to people, going back to the Black Panther Party and Angela Davis and the Civic Center and all of these things, where you see the amplification of the aggressor in the power dynamic really getting frustrated that they do not maintain and hold control. And that's a very dangerous moment.
It's a very dangerous time.
More people get harmed. We see more violence happening in Palestine. We see more violence happening in Africa. We see more violence happening now with Iran. And the communities out there saying, nah, we're not taking this and we're not allowing this anymore. So
and more violence in this country too,
with this country as well. Yes,
the amount of Black people that have been found hanging, and it is. I want to at least speak into that, because I know it sounds like, using these metaphors, it can be easy to sound like I'm being flippant about there is real harm that's happening and that's why we said, like you just said, it's the most dangerous time when the abuser has to up the ante because they need to regain control, and the victim is saying, I'm thinking we need to do something different. It is the most dangerous time. So I just wanted to speak into that, because I don't want to make it sound like I'm ignoring the harm that's happening. So,
and in that danger, the way that we address it, because it's okay for us to name it, but naming that it is a dangerous time, and then see the ways that we can work through. We're naming the conflict and work through. Don't ignore it. Don't act like it is. Don't be conflict averse, but to sit in the knowledge of the conflict, sit in the knowledge of the violence and harm, and develop mechanisms and resources to work through it.
Yeah. I know that you are definitely going through it with your family and what's happening with you right now. And I know this world is going through it right now. And we're just going to keep these conversations going, because this is where the growth happens. And this is where, if more survivors of this interpersonal violence and super Karenism of this country, of the US, can band together and say we're not going to take it anymore, then maybe we can actually stay the course and break the patterns that we've been so stuck in for hundreds of years. So
we know it's true, because to the point of what we're talking about in your family, someone being able to say, "Oh, I think I did something. I need to talk about it."
Yeah,
sure.
I gotta give her props.
That's the breakthrough. That is the breakthrough. And that's the same model, the same absolute model that we need to have.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, take care of yourself, my friend.
Thank you.
And we will talk next time.
All right.
Why do I give a fuck?
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why
do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.